a lot of this comes down to traffic and parking. And when you put a certain amount of people in a neighborhood and they all drive, you are going to hit a limit where people don't want anymore.
Listen, I live in a neighborhood that's just across from Lower Manhattan. It's like the parking is becoming a nightmare. And we're like, stop the development. Having said that, it's about parking, it's about housing, but it's also about water. And you guys get in it. We've just got about a minute left here. Elizabeth, I want to bring you back because they talk about in some of the fast-growing suburbs of Texas's major cities, some communities are putting a halt on new construction because of water constraints. This is about having access to water.
It is. And, you know, these people aren't wholly anti-growth. You know, they have this moratorium on building, but they're also trying to come up with solutions. We had the city administrator talking about how they're going to build 2 wells a year for the next, they didn't even put a time limit on it. They just said for the foreseeable future, they're going to keep building wells in order to try and bring water to these areas. So there are parts of the country where people are coming up with solutions. The other idea is to levy these fees on developers. So you say, okay, you want to build 100 new apartments here, you build a well, you build a school, you provide money to the community. But those things tend to get blocked if the right people lobby against them.
Yeah, it's a tricky issue, but I have a feeling it's not going to end, especially as folks are aging, you know, and moving, and we continue to see this migration to warmer places, lower taxes, all that good stuff.
You said it. You said it. Hey, a big thank you to Bloomberg News editor Elizabeth Fournier, who edited this piece. Again, the most read story on the Bloomberg terminal in the last 8 hours. Check it out. Also, a big thank you to author Henry Grabar, who's the author of the recent book, Paved Paradise, How Parking Explains the World. He joined us from Cambridge.
All right, folks, counting you down. About 28 minutes left in the trade. We're going to drive to the close. The Jay Jacobs over at BlackRock. Right now, though, a check on World and National News and Amy Morris in D.C. Hey, Amy.
Hi, Carol. Want to let you know the 911 system in Massachusetts is still down statewide. They still don't know what's causing this. They say they are working on it. We're keeping an eye on it for you. More weapons are being authorized for Israel's defense. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu complaining that the Biden administration is withholding needed arms shipments. Secretary of State Antony Blinken responded to this at a news conference earlier.
We are continuing to review one shipment with regard to 2,000-pound bombs because of our concerns about their use in a densely populated area, but everything else is moving, of making sure Israel has what it needs to defend itself against this multiplicity of challenges.
Secretary Blinken says neither Israel nor Lebanon nor Iran want a new war, and U.S. diplomacy is trying to arrest the drift toward conflict. President Biden is granting legal protections to undocumented spouses of U.S. citizens living in this country. To qualify for the Parole in Place program, an immigrant must have lived in the U.S. for 10 years and be married to a U.S. citizen. Julie Kirchner is with the Federation for Immigration Reform, and she calls this move an abuse of power.
The Biden administration is completely circumventing Congress. They're creating their own immigration program. This is not in statute.
The move could affect upwards of 500,000 immigrants. The CDC has another warning: ADHD medications in short supply, with some parents struggling to find a new source, and there are options online through telehealth. But Jeannie Shawhart at the Texas Tech Health Science Center says some companies are now charging extra for this service.
Some of them will charge a monthly fee on top of the prescription itself.
Jeannie Shawhart says watch for other red flags, like if you have to speak to a different doctor or nurse every time you have a checkup, or if it's just a little too easy to get a prescription from a telehealth company. Global news 24 hours a day, whenever you want it, with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Amy Morris, and this is Bloomberg.
It's 3:40 on Wall Street. We do check markets all day long here at Bloomberg. 20 minutes to go ahead of the closing bell. With the Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ all advancing. Could see some records today for both the S&P and NASDAQ. Let's head right over to the first word breaking news desk for today's afternoon call. Here he is, Bill Maloney.
And good afternoon, Charlie. Modest gains for the main U.S. averages right now, with the Dow currently up 48 points. S&Ps are higher by 12. And NASDAQ gains 10. The U.S. 10-year yield falls to 4.22%. Gold is higher by 10. Oil is also climbing, but Bitcoin, that's lower by 3%. Among the main 11 S&P sectors, leaders were tech and the industrials. Telecom and consumer discretionary were under pressure. And leaders to the upside in the Dow, Goldman Sachs and Home Depot, while UNH fell 2% and led to the downside. In the chip space, NVIDIA gained 3.7% and is now the world's biggest company. And in other news, Fed's Kugler says that it's likely appropriate to cut rates later this year. Wrapping things up, KB Home reports after the bell. Live from the first breaking news desk, I'm Bill Maloney. Charlie?
Okay, we thank you very much, Bill Maloney, to hear live breaking news over your Bloomberg. Type squawk, SQUA, on your Bloomberg terminal. I'm Charlie Pelleton. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
I'm driving in my car. I turn on the radio.
How about you let me drive?
Oh, no. Who's gonna drive you home? Honey, please, I'll do the driving. Drive on. Excuse me, I want to drive. It's
the question that drives us.
This is the Drive to the Close.
That funky music will drive us till the dawn.
On Bloomberg Radio.
All right, everybody, almost 18 minutes left in today's trading session, getting ready, kind of-ish, to wrap up the Tuesday trade. Kind of bouncing around. You heard Charlie walking you through the equity side of things. Kind of a mellow day on the equity side. Rates are seeing dip lower, unless you are NVIDIA.
Let's see what Jay Jacobs has to say about all this. He's U.S. head of thematics and active equity ETFs at BlackRock. He joins us from New York City. Jay, good to have you on the program. Why even bother with thematics when we could have just gone back, 5 years and bought a bunch of shares of NVIDIA?
If only it were so easy. I think looking forward, you have to see that this is the start of a major, powerful mega force. This is not just about one company. This is about the broader AI ecosystem that's rapidly developing around the world. I think some of the most compelling opportunities that we see today are really across the semiconductor space. This is not just looking at the GPU manufacturers. This is looking at CPUs. This is looking at high bandwidth memory chips. Really, you have to look across the semiconductor space to just see how important these inputs are into the growth of artificial intelligence today.
So would you be all in then, Jay, on everything and anything when it comes to semiconductors?
We're talking with clients every day about the semiconductor industry, and specifically we're seeing, well over $1 billion come into our SOX ETF, SOXX, as people are looking to get that broad exposure to semis. And it's really about this story that this is going to broaden as you see more growth in AI. You're going to see more growth in data. You're going to see more demand for computing power. You're going to see more demand for data centers. You're going to see more demand for power. And so really it's looking across the AI value chain, specifically that infrastructure layer of chips, power, and data centers that's going to benefit over the next few years.
Can you say again how much money has been coming into this particular strategy?
Yeah, over $1 billion into our semiconductor ETF this year, and it's from investors who are really looking at broadening the play beyond just the mega caps and looking at the entire industry.
That's new money, so building on, or has there been any outflows considering the run up? I mean, we're up about 40% on the SOX this year.
We're continuing to see inflows regularly in the product. Yep.
Jay, I'm curious about where exactly you're seeing flows in terms of the active equity ETFs that you manage at BlackRock. Like, where are you not seeing flows and where are you seeing flows?
Yeah, so, at a high level, we're seeing a tremendous trend in the ETF industry where investors are recognizing that ETFs are not synonymous with indexes anymore. ETFs are a tax-efficient, liquid, transparent vehicle that can be used for something as, straightforward as the S&P 500 or as nuanced as a highly concentrated basket of top picks in an unconstrained strategy like we have with our Belt ETF that we launched today. So, in terms of where the growth is coming from, a lot of this is coming from the ETF model space, where financial advisors are increasingly building models to put their clients into because it's repeatable and scalable. And those advisors want to have alpha in their asset allocation. So trying to decide, how much US exposure do I have? How much value exposure do I have? International, but also trying to generate alpha within those buckets. And that's where they're relying on active ETFs and active managers to generate those alpha within those buckets. That's what's driving a lot of the growth in the active ETF space today.
Okay, so let's talk about BELT. It's on the NASDAQ ticker BELT, the BlackRock Long-Term U.S. Equity ETF, as you mentioned, launched today. The benchmark is the S&P 500. What does it offer investors that the S&P 500 does not offer them?
Well, about 80% of this portfolio is different from the S&P 500. It is an unconstrained strategy. It is not trying to have similar sector exposure or similar factor exposure to the S&P 500. Our portfolio managers are looking at the 20 to 25 stocks that they believe are going to grow over the long term by compounding cash flows. And so that can cut across style and sector and really provide a differentiated source of alpha. Now, the way that we see clients using this is really barbelling their portfolios, getting that low-cost, broad exposure through the S&P 500 through IDV, but then pairing that with a true alpha-seeking, unconstrained strategy like BELT, where they can try to exceed the performance of U.S. large caps.
How likely, though, is it in that 80% of the fund, 20 companies, I believe you said, in the U.S., long-term growth, is it likely to mirror some of the most substantial names of the S&P 500 and some of the kind of big tech names that we constantly talk about?
You see a couple of the big names in there, and look, a lot of these names are mega caps and have been as successful as they are because of their ability to develop powerful moats around their business and compound cash flow. So that's really aligned with the ethos of this product. But you also see some very different companies that are very distinct from the S&P 500, and that's why we have 80% active share in this product. It goes far beyond the Mag 7, and it's really looking at kind of unique drivers of return.
The 20%, the remaining 20%, I should say, my understanding is it can go into ADRs, American Depository Receipts, and GDRs, Global Depository Receipts. So we're looking at funds, companies outside the U.S. or companies outside the United States particularly. Is that a bet on those are areas of the global market that have lagged a little bit, or what's the thinking of that?
A lot of the, so you're right, international exposure is really only about 10% of this product today. It really is a U.S. focused product, but one of the areas where the U.S.
But it can do up to 20%, right?
Yes, it can. And one of the areas where the U.S. is not so much of a market leader globally is in the luxury space. So when you look at some of these long-term growth compounders, they're really luxury companies, primarily out of Europe, that have these tremendous moats around them and very strong business models. So that's where you get a little bit of complementary exposure that you wouldn't find in the S&P.
So like an LVMH or something like to that. I'm not saying that that's there, but those kind of companies.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about BRHY. This is BlackRock High Yield ETF. The benchmark is the Bloomberg U.S. Corporate High Yield 2% Issuer Capped Index. Talk to us about the decision to launch BRHY.
This is really a story about providing choice of structure to investors. So we have the portfolio managers on this fund with the same investment objective and the same benchmark managing a BlackRock mutual fund today, the BlackRock High Yield Fund. And we've brought out a very substantially similar strategy into the ETF structure. The idea is that investors are increasingly looking at ETFs as their vehicle of choice. Again, this goes back to that model story. How do you build a scalable, repeatable outcome for your clients? And so we felt that having this strategy in both the mutual fund structure and the ETF structure is providing choice to investors.
Okay, so is this about where flows are going to be going, not toward mutual funds, but toward ETFs instead?
Part of it is we see the just tremendous growth in the active ETF space, absolutely. Part of it is also the relevancy of high yield bonds in models today. So if you look at people who are trying to grow their portfolio over time through total return or trying to draw high income from their portfolio, high yield bonds are a mature space with an increasingly important role in those portfolios. And so we see this as a way to get alpha within that bucket of high yield bonds.
All right, we're going to leave it on that note. Really interesting, and really appreciate your time. Jay, thank you so much. Jay Jacobs, U.S. Head of Thematics and Active Equity ETFs over at BlackRock, joining us on Zoom from New York City on this Tuesday. Yeah, interesting. I'm just looking at BELT, the BlackRock Long-Term Equity ETF. I think it looks like Microsoft Alphabet among some of the top holdings in that.
I've heard of those companies.
Yeah. But also Meta, MasterCard, Chipotle.
If I say 31 to you, what does it mean?
31. S&P record.
Yeah, it'll be the 31st this year if we stay in the green. We'll find out in a few minutes. This is Bloomberg Business Week.
company news headlines on Bloomberg Radio.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. We got 7 minutes to go ahead of the closing bell, on track for records today for both the S&P and NASDAQ. Also, we have a tech rally underway with NVIDIA shares surging today, up 3.6%, now worth more than Apple and Microsoft. NVIDIA jumping, it is up 200% over the past year, and one of its most bullish analysts is projecting that the semiconductor giant will extend its rally, pushing its market value to nearly $5 trillion in the coming year. Rosenblatt securities analyst Hans Mosesmann has hiked his price target on the chipmaker to a Wall Street high of $200 from $140. Right now, NVIDIA is trading at $135 again today, up now by about 3.6%. Boeing CEO Dave Calhoun faced searing criticism at a Senate hearing today that accused him of failing to overcome the company's manufacturing shortcomings by putting profit ahead of safety. Senior aerospace defense and airlines analyst at Bloomberg Intelligence, George Ferguson, tells Bloomberg News the aerospace industry has changed dramatically in recent years.
I think there's a bunch of people that have come to the aerospace world from auto backgrounds and other mass production backgrounds, right? And in those worlds, safety isn't as important. Volume is a lot higher. You can get multiple suppliers to provide products to your production line. You can outsource, but I think if you outsource, it's still got to be a pretty strong relationship with them, not a combative relationship where it's always about price. because it really matters the quality you get to your line, right? Safety's dependent upon it.
Bloomberg's George Ferguson. Those are our top company stories, and this is Bloomberg.
You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Messer and Tim Stenevec on Bloomberg Radio and Television.
All right,
it is
everybody.
Bloomberg Business Week. You know, it's interesting. We have this midweek holiday tomorrow, Juneteenth, and we have a holiday shortened trading week, Carol.
Yeah.
Yet today, there's kind of a lot of action happening. We got Boeing CEO testifying on Capitol Hill. It doesn't feel like sort of a summer holiday shortened week.
No, it's really kind of interesting. We were just talking about it, right? Unusual, very important that we have this holiday, and the recognition is finally here on a national basis. But yeah, it's a little odd to have it in the middle of the week. And there's a week where there's stuff going on, and you can feel some momentum, some hesitation, though it does feel on the equity side of things, although, as you keep saying, not if you're NVIDIA. It's also, though, you know what's funny? Even though it continues to power higher, it is among your top gainers in the NASDAQ 100, but it's not like the top 4 or 5 gainers in the S&P 500, which I thought was kind of interesting. I expected it to be that way. I think it was a little bit earlier in today's session, but I mean, yeah.
Hey, did you get stuck on a train this morning?
I was one of the lucky few that did not get stuck.
Oh, you are lucky, because New Jersey Transit and Amtrak train service facing major delays in and out of Penn Station on Tuesday after overhead wire issues and a disabled train disrupted those morning commutes.
I heard Paul Sweeney talking about it this morning on Surveillance.
He made it in.
He did make it in, but he just said, I think he took a car in, to be quite honest with you.
Wow, that's called blowing up someone's spot.
All trains traveling through Penn Station expected to be delayed by as much as 90 minutes, according to Amtrak. Service was suspended earlier this morning. Big delays. Midtown direct trains are being diverted to Hoboken Station. Tickets are being cross-honored by private carrier buses and the Port Authority pass trains. I think Paul said he was going to go to Hoboken to get home today.
Should have taken a helicopter.
Now, if you're Matt Miller and you're listening, Matt, this is for you, because Matt does say he listens, although he might be home by now. He's in a car.
It depends on the traffic. New Jersey Transit often blames Amtrak for their service disruptions, as Amtrak owns and operates the tracks. At the end of May, Amtrak's CEO and New Jersey Transit's president met to discuss how the two agencies can better work together when a disruption happens.
Yeah, I got to just say, for those who have lived and worked and played in New York City and the New York metro area, live outside and commute, I mean, you need it. Otherwise, it's really tough getting in.
During the month of May, about 75% of morning New Jersey Transit trains to Penn Station were reported on time. So that means 1/4 of the trains were not on time. That's the other way of looking at it.
That creates a really tough commute. All right, folks, we're going to get into the market trade. Heading over to our TV colleagues. The closing bell's starting right now.
The Closing Bell, Bloomberg's comprehensive cross-platform coverage of the U.S. market close, starts right now.
And right now, we are 2 minutes away from the end of the trading day. Romaine Bostic here with Alex Steele, here to help you take you through the closing bell. It's a global simulcast. I'm going to get this right one day. Joined right now by Scarlett Fu in the TV studio. Carol Masser giggling there in the radio booth. Tim Stenevec there.
You just got to get it right before we change the name again.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
We just got it straight.
Yeah, there you go, Carol Masser. Why don't you pick it up? Did you prepare?
Yes. Interesting day. We're going to get another record.
Okay. I don't know where this is going.
Wait, I just really want to know the password things. Can I get your password?
No, I'm not sharing. I follow the rules. I don't do things outside the box.
All right.
It all depends on what services everyone subscribes to.
Yeah.
All I know is you give out too many I've been blocked because I can't get in because I think.
Oh, yeah, I'm one of those people.
So they're starting to figure it out. That's the issue.
They're on you, Carol.
Yeah.
Hey, did you guys hear about NVIDIA?
What?
Did you hear about this today?
It is NVIDIA's world, man. We're just living in it.
It is.
Happening.
It's pretty wild to see. 31 record days for the S&P 500. Another new record for NVIDIA today. It's the largest company by market cap in the world now, surpassing Microsoft, surpassing Apple. People are still buying it.
Yeah.
It's a story that people love. But you know what's another story that people once loved once upon a time?
What?
EVs. And Fisker filed for bankruptcy. So, the next big thing, this is a good reminder that the next big thing isn't something that can hold on to that status forever.
Wait, it doesn't always go up?
Well, I mean, also with Fisker, though, they have to bend metal at some point to make the cars. I mean, luckily, NVIDIA doesn't have to do anything along those lines.
All right, well, Fisker certainly a casualty in the EV space here. Other builds still continuing on, and of course, NVIDIA, the winner on the day here, the biggest point gainer, in the point contributor to the S&P's moves to the upside on the day. 14 points higher than where it was yesterday, about a 0.2% increase as we wait for these numbers to settle. The Dow Jones Industrial Average up by about 57 points or 0.1%. And the NASDAQ, we're just going to kind of call it unchanged here on the day. It's up about 5 points. That's only good for about a fraction of 0.1% there. Meanwhile, the Russell 2000 trying to get in on the action again on the day of roughly 0.2%.
I just kind of toggling back and forth between Microsoft and NVIDIA market cap, and NVIDIA's just going to squeeze past them to end the day to be the world's largest market cap. Having said that, S&P 500, Scarlett, yeah, most names higher, 310 to the upside, 188, losing some ground today.
Yeah, and you can certainly see that reflected in the IMAP. We'll take a look at the sectors and the performances that we have there. On the downside, let's just focus on the few red slices. Communications services down by 0.8%. Consumer discretionary, that's being dragged lower by Tesla. So going back to that EV story, not necessarily playing out right now. Materials off by 0.1%. On the flip side, financials, tech, and industrials all gaining at least 0.5%.
What happened to Ball Corp? Down 6% here on the day. Cans, man.
Wait for the decliners. Maybe it'll come
I didn't put Ball Corp
sorry,
in there.
Did I step on Tim's toes?
I didn't put Ball Corp
Apparently
in
not.
there. I'm sorry. Such a disappointment.
All right, it's never too late. I'm going to get to the gainers right now. NVIDIA, of course, now the biggest. I know, so I'm going to try and go quick. Biggest market cap in the world, finishing 3.3 trillion. Can you guys keep them quiet?
No.
NVIDIA up about 3.5%. Rosenblatt Securities raising its price target on the company to a street high of $200 a share from $140. This is even, Bloomberg reporting insiders selling some shares worth more than $700 million, as though Tim reminded us that's just a drop in the bucket. But NVIDIA up about 3.5% in today's session. Micron Technology up way off its highs, but 3.8% to the upside nonetheless. B of A adding it to its US One list, a collection of the bank's best investment ideas. Wedbush analyst also Matt Bryson increasing his price target to 170 from 130 ahead of the company's results next week. Stock closing at 153 and change. Lazy Boy, outperformer, finishing up about 19% higher in today's session. Company coming out with fourth quarter adjusted earnings per share and sales that topped estimates, so it's up the most in I think about 7 years, so all the way back to late June of 2017. And Silk Road, a little deal action, up 24%. It's a $1 billion medical equipment company, rallying after Boston Scientific agreed to buy the company for $27.50 a share. So there you have it. I'm done.
Okay, I got the decliners. I do want to look at how shares of Boeing ended the day.
That was faster than I thought, Carol.
I know. Yeah. A little pressure there, buddy.
Yeah. Speaking of pressure, that's what CEO Dave Calhoun faced as he testified before senators over the last 2 hours. He got searing criticism from these lawmakers who accused him of failing to overcome the company's shortcomings by putting profit ahead of safety. Shares finished the day down by 1.91%. Ahead of the testimony today, Boeing quality inspector alleged that the company mishandled and lost track of hundreds of faulty parts. And then there's what's happening in space right now, totally separate from everything on Capitol Hill. Boeing and NASA pushing back by 4 days the return home of 2 astronauts from the ISS. It's the latest disruption for a program that has been beset by delays. Boeing down 33% so far this year. Also checking in on shares of Apple after the run that we saw last week and after NVIDIA surpassed it to become the most valuable company, along with Microsoft surpassing that one too. But Apple shares fell after the company was cut to neutral from Accumulate by Philips Securities analyst Helena Wang, citing a rally in the company stock following the recent reveal of that new AI framework at WWDC. And NextEra Energy shares falling today. This after the company said that it intends to sell $2 billion of equity units. Shares ended up falling today by about 2.6%. It was among the worst performers on a percentage basis in the S&P 500. And an honorable mention goes to Philip Morris International for a decliner today. Wow. The shares fell this after the company halted online sales of Zyn. These are the nicotine pouches in the U.S. in response to a District of Columbia subpoena related to flavored products that are banned there. Shares ended up falling only about by 0.8%. They were down over 2% a little earlier in the session.
Flavored tobacco products. I just can't. I could never do menthols. All right, guys, let's go to
Is there tobacco in them? I don't.
I have no idea.
think it's just nicotine. I don't know.
Did you
Quit
ever
smoking over
smoke?
20 years ago.
Did you ever smoke?
I did, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I quit over 20 years ago,
That's
so yay me.
impressive.
My lungs have regenerated. All right, let's get to the bond market here. We have a rally pretty much all across the board, across the curve. It started once you had retail sales that disappointed and continued on the long end once you got that super solid 20-year auction. That moment where all of a sudden investors shun treasuries because of too much supply has not yet materialized with that solid takedown of that 20-year scar.
All right, we have some breaking news. Golden Goose, the luxury sneaker maker, was supposed to go public this week, but according to Bloomberg reporting, which cites people familiar with the matter, that company has decided to postpone its planned IPO. They've decided to shelve the listing because luxury stocks have not done too well. There's also a lot of turmoil in European stock markets because of political uncertainty.
So this was going to list in Europe. So this is more about the European market story, and not being like, I guess, accommodative enough for them.
Perhaps conditions are not ripe,
Yeah.
are not right either. So maybe
Yeah.
that might be part of it. But I mean, the retail sales report that we got today also certainly doesn't help either.
How many pairs of these do you own, Scarlett?
No, I only own Birkenstocks. I have like 20 of those.
I can verify this.
Yeah, I don't spend up to $1,000 for sneakers.
I was actually interested. I went to a store downtown, and I went into them, but all the shoes were dirty. I didn't know what to do.
Do you have 20 pairs of Birkenstocks?
Yeah, it's kind of embarrassing.
20 pairs? Wait, is that for real?
Yeah, almost. I don't throw them out because you can get the soles resold.
Because they don't die.
But the point is, you get the soles resold, and you keep the same shoe. You don't buy 20 pairs of them.
Okay, this is what's going to happen.
It takes me a while to get that done.
I'm going to count my over the top. He's going to count his over the top. Scar, you're going to cut your Birkenstocks.
Okay.
We're going to reconfigure this, guys, on Thursday.
And
we're
see
gonna
who
get
can
the data.
spare who.
Yes.
Okay. All right. We're going to get to
Speaking of shoes.
Right. Maybe you're investing in Birkenstocks. Well, we have an interesting story about Gen Z investors. Speaking. Oh, yeah, right. All right. Gen Z investors apparently shunning the 60-40 portfolio, but they're investing in kind of alt investments. Things like sneakers and classic cars. Apparently, there's kind of been a shift in what they are investing over maybe an older investor.
Okay, we got the survey from Bank of America. They surveyed wealthy Americans. They found that 94% of Gen Z and millennial investors are interested in collecting items such as watches, rare cars, and sneakers. That compares to only 57% of baby boomers who expressed interest in these collectibles.
Huh? What do we make of this? Are they going to collect stamps? Like, would they be on the same? I mean, Bill Grossman was selling his stamps. Was like, we want to pass it on to the next generation. Like, is this part of it?
Yeah, well, but I think it's, I mean, we've heard this from a lot of guests. I mean, that these younger people, I mean, they just see different areas to generate wealth, and maybe not stamps, but like I said, sneakers and some of these other collectibles. I don't know, I've been surprised by it. They could look at some of the auctions we've had at Christie's and at Sotheby's, you know,
I can
which
get
have
on
been
board
much in
with
focus.
sneakers more than I can get on board with NFTs.
It just seems like a lot of work. It
Can
seems
you
like a
buy-
lot of work to go and find these things that you think will be worth something versus something else that's...
You just do it online. It's easy.
What do you...
You can sell your Birkenstocks? They could be worth something in a while.
They're all used. That's a problem.
Oh, my God. All right. To be continued. No doubt about that. All right, guys. That's a wrap. Our cross-platform coverage, radio, TV, YouTube, Bloomberg Originals. We will see you again, same time, same place on Thursday.
This is Bloomberg Business Week. Insight from the reporters and editors who bring you America's most trusted business magazine. Plus, global business, finance, and tech news as it happens. Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Masser and Tim Stenevec on Bloomberg Radio.
It is Bloomberg Business Week. Carol, you'll remember on Friday, we talked about this story about how everyone really is sick a lot more often in our post-COVID world.
Yeah, it kind of has been staying with me in a big way. I keep thinking about that, talking and having a lot of conversations in and around the newsroom about it.
Yeah, here's the data that we were citing here. At least 13 communicable diseases, from the common cold to measles and tuberculosis, are surging past their pre-pandemic levels in many regions, and often by significant margins. That's according to analysis by Bloomberg News and London-based disease forecasting firm Airfinity.
So we are very curious what Dr. Iman Abu Zaid has to say about this. She's co-founder and CEO at Incredible Health. They're a marketplace that connects nurses to hospitals. She joins us from Austin, Texas. We've leaned on her coming out of the pandemic.
During the
pandemic to really get a good gut check on what's going on among the healthcare community and in particular what's going on with nurses. Dr. Abu Zaid, great to have you back with us. We do want to kind of start there because you're so good about telling us kind of what is top of mind for the nursing community. And I am curious about if they're seeing people more, sick with kind of strange ailments, if you will, different communicable diseases. What are they seeing specifically?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. So the U.S. healthcare system is seeing increases in patient demand, right? So the demand from patients and sicker patients continues to increase, and we're struggling to make sure that we have enough healthcare workers to support patients. In our most recent, so our platform, our two-sided marketplace, as hospitals and nurses, we work with over 1 million U.S. nurses in the country and over 1,500 hospitals. Our most recent study was actually of healthcare executive or hospital leaders. 90% of them are stating that they project the nursing shortage to worsen in the future years, and only 32% are satisfied with the ratio of nurses to patients on their units today.
We care about how this looks over time, and we care about sort of the trend and whether or not things are getting better, things are getting worse. What do the data tell you?
So the areas that are getting better is that there's a larger portion of nurses that are staying in the profession. So during COVID, we were seeing like an exodus, not just out of their current jobs, but out of that, opting out of being nurses altogether. So we've definitely seen an improvement there, and we've also seen an improvement in mental health for nurses. The areas where we're not seeing much improvement is staffing and ensuring that there's enough nurses on the floors. And that's reflected by the fact that only 30% of hospital leaders are satisfied with the number of nurses that are on the floors, given the volume of patients that they each need to take care of.
You know, Iman, one of the things I want to ask you is I feel like we've talked to you, for a long time, and in terms of the trends, it feels like it continues to be a very stressful one for nurses, and that there's just not enough. Is there anything moving in the positive direction?
Yeah, so we still see burnout as the #1 reason for why nurses leave their job, and we're still seeing high turnover of 20%. I think what's changed in a positive and more optimistic direction is that we're seeing more and more hospital leaders listen and address the challenges of this workforce. Specifically, we're seeing continued increases in wages and salaries for nurses across the board. We're also seeing more hospital leaders pay attention to and implement more flexible scheduling. So nurses have more flexibility in their work schedules. And then finally, we're also seeing more investment in career advancement and career training for nurses as well.
How is the pipeline looking for nurses coming from nursing school? It's something that we've talked to you a lot about, the lack of availability of training for these nurses to fill these positions that are open. How's that looking?
So there have been increases in the number of nurses graduating from nursing school, which is great, but it's still not, the numbers that are increasing there are still not keeping up with the demand that we need. And so that's the reason why 90% of healthcare leaders believe the nursing shortage is going to continue and into the future as well. The other sort of big change that we've seen is just the increase in verbal and physical assaults that nurses are handling. So 60% of health system leaders have seen an increase in assaults. And so there's definitely a need to improve workplace, to address workplace violence too.
What are the healthcare executives, what's their views on immigration in terms of feeding the nursing community and the jobs that are needed? Because I think any of us who've been in hospitals, we see how important the immigrant community has been ultimately in terms of providing nursing.
Absolutely. The immigrant community has been critical to stabilizing the healthcare workforce in the U.S. And I think on the whole, health system leaders would love to hire from abroad, but I don't think our immigration policies today make that easy. And so a lot of the health system leaders that have tried international nursing and have tried to hire from abroad can't do it as easily as they were able to, a decade ago.
How willing are they to take it on politically? And as you know, you take a stand on different political issues and it can come back with you, come back to you in a big way, in a negative way.
Absolutely ready and willing to take it on politically. I'm also in the tech industry, and so I know that my counterpart CEOs are taking the immigration issue very seriously in Congress. But at the end of the day, the appetite of both parties is not where it needs to be when it comes to this topic. Whether it's tech or healthcare, we need more immigrants, and there's not enough Americans to provide the workers we need in both of those industries.
Yeah, we talk about this a lot, and not with relation to nursing, but with relation to just economic growth in our country, Carol. The idea that in terms of birth rate here in the U.S., we're not having enough kids to actually replace all the people who are dying. So we need immigrants to fill that gap and come and do those jobs that those people who are retiring and dying are no longer doing.
Yeah, it's such a massive issue. And I don't know, Dr. Abu Zaid, how do you think about kind of what's the conversation me and Tim might be having in 5 years? Is it going to be markedly different? Is it going to be more stressed? How do you think about that?
That's a great question. So there's many leaders and many companies and health systems and so on working on tackling these challenges. One sort of bright spot area is AI. And so over half of health system leaders in our study say that they are using artificial intelligence for nursing operations. It's primarily being used and implemented in scheduling and more administrative tasks. It's not yet being used in recommendations for patient care. But health system leaders are sort of leaning into this new technology to help relieve their workforces as well, and to see if there's certain tasks that can be automated, given the overall challenge that we've been discussing.
You know, I think everybody's probably seen the videos that are out there about kind of humanoid robots that are being made in China specifically to help with elderly and maybe providing health care. Is that something that you think, okay, it's just a matter of time that we'll see that certainly throughout American healthcare institutions?
I think given the pressure that health system leaders are under to, manage their P&L, to drive a profitable business and to deliver on patient care, I don't think they have much of a choice. They have to lean into newer technologies, including AI.
Unbelievable. Yeah, but yeah, I get it. Dr. Iman Abu Zaid, thank you so much. Co-founder, CEO at Incredible Health, joining us there in Austin, Texas. Great to check in with her once again. We right now, though, want to check in on a name that just reported after the close.
Yeah, shares of KB Home surging right now, up by 4.4%. This after the company reported results. They narrowed their fiscal year housing revenue forecast. They now see fiscal year housing revenue come in at 6.7 to 6.9 billion. Estimates were for 6.5 to 6.9. So narrowing that forecast,
to the
but
upside,
also
though,
to the
right?
upside,
Or
exactly.
on the higher end, yeah.
Second quarter deliveries did come in above estimates as well, 3,523 versus estimates of 3,416. Second quarter revenue, Carol, coming in above estimates at 1.71 billion, beating estimates of $1.66 billion.
Jeffrey Mesger is the chairman and CEO. Some commentary in that report. We produced solid results in our 2024 second quarter with our key metrics above the high end of our guidance ranges, as Tim just pointed out and read. Buyers remained resilient in their desire for home ownership despite the volatility in mortgage interest rates. That's pretty upbeat.
That is.
Yeah, stock up more than 4%, 4.4%, 4.5% here in the aftermarket.
It's always a story of supply and demand, no matter what we're talking about. If we're talking about the shortage of nurses and the need for care and long-term care with Dr. Iman Abu Zaid right now, or if we're talking about the need for housing in this country.
It's like we go back to basic supply demand, right?
That's what everything is. It's all based on that.
Yeah, it's a really good point. All right, watching KB Home in the aftermarket. We'll see if it carries over to some of the other home builders. In the meantime, we've got a great guest coming up. Looking forward to, we talk about the future. We just talked about it with our last guest. What might come? We've got a great guest to get into that. He's got a new book out. He knows something about it, having spent a fair amount of time over at Alphabet and Google. What's next is now how to live future ready. We're going to get into it in just a moment, right here on Bloomberg Business Week.
It's 4:21 on Wall Street. We do check markets all day long here at Bloomberg. KB home shares higher after earnings, up right now by about 5%. Second quarter deliveries 35.23, estimates 34.16. Revenue $1.71 billion. Estimates for KB Home $1.66 billion. So an after-hours beat. KB Home up by roughly 5%. A rally in chip makers drove stocks to another record, 31st this year for the S&P, up 13 to 54.87, up by about 0.2%. The Dow today up 56, up 0.1%. NASDAQ also at a record, little changed, up 5 points. 10-year yield 4.21%. The 2-year 4.70%. Gold up 0.5%. 23.30 the ounce, and West Texas Intermediate crude up 1.6%. 81.59 for a barrel of WTI. So again, recapping, stocks higher. S&P up 13, up 0.2%. I'm Charlie Pelleton. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Some pretty astonishing virtual anchors in India.
What?
From the public broadcaster. Here's what they do. They provide weather forecasts, commodity prices, farming trends, and updates on agri-research and state welfare programs to millions of farmers. She said she's pretty astonished by them, and she writes that the same tech behind fake videos of Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky surrendering to Russia, or fake Taylor Swift supporting Donald Trump, is also being harnessed to fill airwaves with legitimate news around the world.
Virtual anchors are one thing. I was going to say Taylor Swift, fake Taylor Swifts are one thing, but fake anchors?
Yes.
Virtual anchors? Now we've got a problem.
Should we be uneasy about the future?
I think maybe fair to say there's a lot of uncertainties about the future, about what comes next. But knowing what the future holds was our next guest's job, Tim.
We got with us Dr. Frederick Furt. He's a founder of Google's Innovation Lab, and he was Google's first chief innovation analyst. He's got a new book out, What's Next is Now: How to Live Future Ready. He joins us from Santa Cruz. Dr. Furt, good to have you on the program. I love the idea of this book, the fact that people are so concerned about the future, and literally your job was to explain the future to folks at Google, and that's exactly where I want to start. What does it mean to be the chief innovation evangelist and founder of Google's Innovation Lab? What did you do there?
Yes, Carol and Tim, thanks for having me today. I love to dive into the future with you. What I really did is observing people, how they build the future and how they build a better future for everyone, right? So I spent time with, thousands of people and trying to really figure out, how can you create a better future for yourself? And that was really the driving question for me.
Well, it's interesting. So when we think about that, creating a better future for ourselves, how much is really in our control? How much is not?
Yeah, you make a great point, right? People often talk about the past rather than the future because it's just familiar and certain as it already has happened, right? The past really provides a sense of security and predictability, which is comforting for our minds, to be honest. However, constantly thinking and dwelling on the past really limits our ability to imagine and create a better future. So you mentioned previously, when it comes to our future, we love predictions, right? We love predictions like the weather and, what some futurists or other people might predict.
Back to the Future Part 2, great movie. Didn't necessarily all come true.
Exactly, yes. Nothing of that might come true, right? But our minds really crave these forecasts because they create a sense of certainty. And this certainty, I think, is a false one because no one can predict the future. And so what people are doing is they tend to adopt a passive stance, right? Waiting to see what happens next, feeling that the future is something that happens to them rather than something that they can influence. And so I'm now challenging us to rethink our relationship with the future. Instead of passively...
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, please.
Yeah, what might happen? I want us to actively participate in shaping what will happen, right? And I think the shift in perspective is crucial for overcoming this inertia that keeps us tethered to the past.
But this is not simply about framing. It's not simply about how you choose to look at the future. It's actually about being an active role in changing the way the future comes to you, right?
Exactly, yes. So moving away from that question, what will the future bring? That question we all love, right? But I want us to move away from that question towards what future do I want to create? Because that empowers us to take ownership of our destinies. And so most of what's happening in the so-called outer world, and you described a little bit about, we see fake news and all of those, we can't control. But what we can control is our inner world, how I like to describe it, how we respond to the things that are happening to us, and also what choices we make in the moment. And this is really our inner agency where the true power lies.
So having said that, I'm listening to you talk and I'm thinking, okay, you understand the tech world in a way like nobody else does. So there's open source models and then there's closed ecosystems. Both can have value. So where's the balance of all of us as we try to figure out our future and kind of thinking about it maybe that way?
Yes. So when it comes to the future, right, I feel like it's more important to really focus on, again, what I describe as a mind state, right? So that is your perspective you have in any moment and how you experience the present. So it doesn't mean like that, we should focus on like what's the next tech or what's the next application or, what are some of the predictions. Focus on what you can control. And this is your relationship with technology, where you can make choices and trying to experiment with new technology, try things out, to really figure out like what works for you and what doesn't work for you.
I think about this a lot, the idea of sort of the inevitable tech that comes to us from so many of the companies that Carol and I talk about on our program each and every day. And I'm wondering if there's ever, in your view, going to be a time when we reject a piece of consumer technology or we reject some sort of innovation because as people, we don't want it to come to us. And I'm thinking of something like the AI world that is coming, regardless of whether we want it to be here or not, the fake robocalls that come during the political campaigns, the stuff we see on social media that are deep fakes. What about that stuff?
Absolutely. Great points. Again, what I argue for is that we should not focus on the tech itself. We should focus on what we can control, and that is our mind state, right? That means like, what is our perspective on these things, and how can we, for example, be open towards these technologies to really figure out like what works and what doesn't work for us, right? And trying to experiment to really learn how these things work and then make a decision afterwards, right? I feel like most of our times we, follow our, what I call a negativity bias, right? That is kind of like deeply ingrained in us, where we're trying to figure out like what are the flaws or what are the mistakes or the things that might go wrong, right? Instead of like just being open in the first place and say like, hey, what can this technology do for me and how can I leverage to, something that I want to accomplish in my life before I make a decision and say like, I don't want to use that personally or in my professional work.
I have to say, I feel like I'm in a yoga class, which I really kind of love, because it's the whole idea of kind of getting your mind, in the right place, if you will, or letting go, right? That's kind of what can be tough with meditation, right? You constantly have stuff coming in and you've got to be like, put that on the shelf for a while because I've just got to kind of take a moment. Having said that, can you get in the right mind state as an employee thinking about their future if your management is not that way? Or vice versa. As a manager or company, if you don't have your employees that way, can you not kind of achieve the goals you need to?
Yeah, Carol, that's a great point, and thanks for sharing your story on your yoga experience. Again, like I think what we've learned is that the best things we can control is our own mind state, right? Instead of focusing on someone else and the choices they make, right? Focus on the choices that are you making in the moment. And you can make these choices driven by, what I call radical optimism or unreserved openness or compulsive curiosity, right? These could be helpful in a way that you look at situations just in a different way and then figure out like you can actually have much more control of what's going to happen next instead of trying to change someone else like your manager or change someone else in your team, trying to, focus on what you can control because that I think is going to determine your future.
We only have about 30 seconds left, and then we're going to do some news, and we're going to come back with you, Dr. Ferd. But leave us just with 30 seconds on one thing that everybody should do between now and, let's say, I don't know, the next few weeks to prepare themselves for the future.
Yeah.
Yes. So for me, what's really important is that you're trying to imagine. Imagine is that human superpower that we all have, right? But we don't use it enough, right? To really trying to figure out like, not just what I want to be in the future, but how do I want to be in the future? And ask yourself that question, because that might reveal that, you want to have qualities in the future that are related to compassion, kindness, openness, curiosity, optimism, and so forth. So rather imagining like what I want to get in like my next years, trying to imagine how do you want to be.
We're going to come back to you in just a moment. We're going to continue with Dr. Ferd. Right now, though, a check on world and national news over to Amy Morris in D.C. Hey, Amy.
Hi, Carol. The 911 system across Massachusetts has now been restored. It went dark for about an hour, maybe 2 hours, somewhere in there. The state's Executive Office of Public Safety and Security says it is not clear how many communities were disrupted, and they don't know what caused this disruption yet. That investigation's ongoing. President Biden is announcing a new plan providing a pathway to citizenship to about 500,000 undocumented spouses married to U.S. citizens. Biden says he wants those immigrants to put their skills to work in America.
I want those who've been educated at U.S. college universities put their skills and knowledge to work here in America. I want to keep building the strongest economy in the world with the best workforce in the world. Just ask business leaders, ask labor leaders, ask economists, ask elected officials. They know it's good for American business. They know it's good for the American economy. They know it's good for America, period.
The program applies to immigrants who have been living in the country for at least a decade. The Trump campaign calls the move mass amnesty and a power grab for votes. The House Ethics Committee gave an unusual public update into its long-running investigation of Florida Republican Representative Matt Gaetz, saying its review now includes whether Gaetz engaged in sexual misconduct and illicit drug use. Gaetz has categorically denied all the allegations before the committee. I can't wait to get you again. And singer Justin Timberlake was arrested early this morning. He was accused of driving while intoxicated on New York's Long Island. He was arrested, held overnight before he was taken to Sag Harbor Village Justice Court, where he was arraigned this morning and was released on his own recognizance, meaning no bail was set. Timberlake's representatives did not immediately return requests for comment. Global news 24 hours a day, whenever you want it, with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Amy Morris, and this is Bloomberg.
It's 4:40 on Wall Street. We do check markets all day long here at Bloomberg. It was another up day for the Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ. Another day of records on the S&P. 31st record this year for the S&P 500 index, up 13. The S&P 500 now within striking distance of 5,500, now at 54.87, an advance today of 0.2%. The Dow up 56, up by about 0.1%. The NASDAQ Composite Index today climbed 5 points, also a record. NASDAQ now at 17,862. We had the 10-year at 4.21% with a 2-year yielding 4.71%. Spot gold up $10 the ounce, up 0.4%. And West Texas Intermediate crude up 1.5%. NVIDIA, a standout today, jumping another 3.5% to another record. NVIDIA now at 135.58. Jay Jacobs, the head of active ETFs at BlackRock, right here on Bloomberg Business Week, said the rally in NVIDIA and other AI chip stocks is justified.
Looking forward, you have to see that this is the start of a major, powerful mega force. You know, this is not just about one company. This is about the broader AI ecosystem that's rapidly developing around the world. I think some of the most compelling opportunities that we see today are really across the semiconductor space. This is not just looking at the GPU manufacturers. This is looking at CPUs. This is looking at high bandwidth memory chips. Really, you have to look across the semiconductor space to just see how important these inputs are into the growth of artificial intelligence.
Jay Jacobs of BlackRock interviewed on Bloomberg Business Week. Again, recapping stocks higher. S&P up 13, up 0.2%, now at 54.87. I'm Charlie Pelleton. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. I want to get back to our guest. We're talking with Dr. Frederick Furt. He is founder of Google's Innovation Lab and Google's first chief innovation evangelist. He's also the author of the new book, What's Next is Now, How to Live Future Ready. He's still with us from Santa Cruz, California. Dr. Furt, one of the things I was curious about, and it kind of plays off a story that we have talked about here at Bloomberg that's talked about how Google, how they have combined their research labs. And this was specifically combining the two labs, their Google Brain and DeepMind. And now they have an AI super unit called Google DeepMind. And they get into a lot of the reasons why and why it made sense. And some of it had to do with, you know, the AI competitive race. And you're seeing some upstarts and that seem to be more nimble. So I am curious, this idea of, in a company that's as innovative as Google and Alphabet, and this idea of being in the kind of right mind state, is it more difficult as you become a more established, older technology company to be nimble and be as innovative? Is it a little bit tougher, or to rally the troops to be that way?
So I've spent about 12 and a half years at Google, really trying to figure out, like, what's the Google way to innovate, right? And in my first 18 months, I traveled to about 27 offices and worked with, you know, hundreds of employees, Googlers, to really figure out, like, what's the Google way to innovate. And what I found is that every time I, you know, saw some groundbreaking technology or idea, that it's not about the resources people have. It's not about the environment they're in. It's not about the time they're spending on these. It's their mind state, right? It's how they're radically optimistic, how they're open, curious, how they experiment, and how they show empathy. These are, for me, the 5 dimensions, what I call, of a future-ready mind state. So when these are at play, right, I always saw that something radically innovative and different is going to emerge. And so for me, the question is always, like, how can we all learn these dimensions of a future-ready mindset and practice them so that we all, you know, are capable of shaping our future that we want to see happening?
But I kind of want to go back to Carol's question. Does that mindset still come to people who work at a company that is now giving dividends to shareholders, or that has grown so big that you're not necessarily interacting with those teams all over the world? Maybe it's more siloed in this day and age.
So what's interesting is that we see the same things that happen in organizations actually happen to people, right, and human beings. Let's put a focus on curiosity, right? curiosity drives us to explore and really understand our world better, which is really crucial in our rapidly changing environment. So we're all born with curiosity, and we have that natural curiosity that actually goes dormant over time, right, as we grow up. So the good news is that we can reawaken it by continuously questioning and seeking to learn more about everything around us, right? So that's true for human beings. We probably see the same in organizations, right, where we see that startups actually are the most curious, right? They don't have, an established way of working. They usually don't have big funding. They have an idea, and they're curious about developing or growing this idea. And so for me, it's really about helping people to rediscover something that is deeply human, which is their optimism, their openness, and also their curiosity and their sense to experiment and try things out, right? And if we humans can do that and reawaken that, I have full confidence that organizations can do that too.
Do you think it's broken down when you look at the political environment globally?
Again, like what I feel like is, for me, probably one of the most important dimensions of a future-ready mindset is what I call expansive empathy, right?
Mm-hmm.
What I mean by that is understanding and connecting with the experience of others, right? It really enriches our interactions and decisions, and ensuring that they're considerate and inclusive, which is really essential in a diverse global environment. So I feel if we all show more empathy, right, and that means you as a parent, as a journalist or a reporter, or as a teacher or a politician, right? You have more empathy for each other. I think we all see that a better future will actually happen.
I love the optimism, but
that's broken down. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we don't live in a world. I mean, look at just politics right now. There's a real lack of empathy, I would say, in Washington, D.C. among colleagues, members of the House who continually scream at each other. There's a lack of decorum that was present just a generation ago, Dr. Furt. How can you say that we're in a place where you're optimistic about empathy?
Exactly. So I'm optimistic that we all can rediscover it, and we can actually practice and train it, right? So there is a way you can learn to be more optimistic. There's also a way that you can reawaken your curiosity. And there's a way that you can practice empathy, right? And it's something, you're absolutely right, Tim, that we need to all develop and grow more. And in my book, I actually give practices that we all can try out to become more empathetic, to become more optimistic, to become more open and curious. And so if we all use those practices and at the same time learn from these stories that I share, I think we have a good chance that, we see a better future happening.
There's a great, I was going to say, page 179, change your mind state note, and it's an experiment you can do kind of, you say, riding on public transportation. And, sometimes I look around and just everybody's buried in their phones, and nobody has any awareness of anybody around them.
And that's technology that's doing that.
And that's technology doing that.
I always wonder what Steve Jobs would think if he were around today and just walked into a subway car and saw everybody just looking at their phones.
Well, Dr. Furt, is that part of the problem? We're so buried. We're so looking inward. We're buried in our phones. I mean, we don't kind of think about the people around us and what's going on. And forgive us, we only have about 30, 40 seconds here.
Yes, so I think when we look on the phone, right, we're not looking inwards, right? That's the first thing. So, Carol, I would argue in the same way with you, right? We should probably look more inwards, right? And doing meditation practices and reflecting practices, I think, help us to really trying to discover what's going on in our inner world, right? What is our mind state currently? Are we actually more closed, more afraid, more uncertain? And if we are, right, how can I shift? How can I change this mind state to be more open, to be more optimistic and more curious again? And I think if we are able to do that and practice that even more, again, like I think we're going to see a great future happening.
Really interesting. So glad we could get some time with you. Thank you so much. Congratulations on the book. Good luck with it. Dr. Frederick Furt. He's founder of Google's Innovation Lab, Google's first chief innovation evangelist, and his new book that's out, What's Next Is Now, How to Live Future Ready. We forgot to say he actually sends a packet of seeds.
You can hear the seeds right now in a little bag.
The seeds for your future now.
Yeah, very cool.
Kind of loving that. This is Bloomberg.
headlines on Bloomberg Radio.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. After hours, KB Home shares up 2.3% right now after the home builder lifted the lower end of its housing revenue forecast for the full year. KB Home's second quarter revenue, $1.71 billion, estimates $1.66 billion. Second quarter deliveries, 3,523. Estimates were for 3,416. But again, after hours, after an initial 5% jump, we got KB Home up right now by about 2.3%. Another home builder reported last night, Lennar. It reported better than expected orders, but its forecast for shares in the current quarter missed analyst estimates today. Shares of Lennar down by 5%. Lazy Boy shares rallied after the furniture company reported fourth quarter adjusted EPS and sales that topped estimates. Lazy Boy up by 19.4%. Philip Morris International has stopped online sales of its popular nicotine pouch brand Zyn. And with more, here's Bloomberg's Dan Schwartzman.
Charlie, it received a subpoena in the District of Columbia related to flavored products that are banned there. Philip Morris said its preliminary investigation indicated that there have been sales of flavored pouches in D.C., quote, predominantly related to certain online sales platforms and some independent retailers. The tobacco company said it could face an unspecified material liability if there is an unfavorable outcome related to the matter. Zyn delivers nicotine to users via small pouches resembling tea bags placed between the gum and upper lip, and it has been a growth engine for Philip Morris in the U.S. Charlie?
And that's Dan Schwartzman reporting. Philip Morris shares lower today by 0.8%. And those are some of our top company stories at this hour. I'm Charlie Pellet, and this is Bloomberg.
This is Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Messer and Tim Stenevec on Bloomberg Radio and Television.
All right, everybody. Tim and I getting ready to wrap up on the Tuesday edition of Bloomberg Business Week. As you know, markets closed tomorrow for Juneteenth. So looking to honor and think about the significance of that. I think it's a good thing that we've got a day to kind of really sit with that.
Yeah, it was made a federal holiday just a few years ago. President Biden signed it into law in his first year in office. And it means that we have a holiday midweek. It's a holiday shortened trading week. And it also means that Doug Krisner has a full week.
That's right. We'll be on the air tomorrow in the evening.
And tonight.
Well, this evening, obviously.
Yeah.
And we're not going anywhere.
We're not going anywhere. How are you thinking about NVIDIA, largest market cap company?
You know, this is a fascinating story. I was talking to someone earlier today. One of the big question marks hanging over, I think, this move into artificial intelligence is whether or not the companies that are actually investing in the technology realize a return on their investment, the ROI on AI.
Say that 5 times fast.
Right?
Yeah.
So imagine a world where it works and the adoption happens at a rate that is even surprising to those who are most optimistic on making this call, that we could see such a transformation in the labor market, perhaps at a rate that is much quicker than what the market could, under normal circumstances, when you get this type of massive disruption, can handle. And I don't think there is a historic analog here. But the question that I ask this person is, should we be talking about a retraining program?
For
Some of the retraining programs that get attached to these trade agreements when, you know, American workers lose employment because manufacturing is
not funny.
Sourced overseas.
But do these training programs ever bear fruit?
I don't know. You'd have to, you know, do a little bit of reporting on that. But it's certainly been baked into some of these trade agreements where workers have been, you know, the beneficiary in some way. They're given an opportunity to get access to some money from the government to apply or to retrain and get new skills. So I don't know where this is going, but it's just stunning. And everyone that you talk to, and yesterday, before we went on the air, when you and I, you know, sat down for our quick chat, over the weekend, I was listening to a long-form article, feature piece, that I accessed from The Atlantic through their text-to-speech software, which I guess is a product of news over audio. This blew me away. It was more than 2.5 hours, and the read was near human-like. And what
so
was
nuanced and
yes,
interesting and engaging.
so I said to this person today with whom I was communicating, a year from now AI will have mastered that read.
Our last segment, Tim, in our introduction, talked about one of our reporters who covers AI in Asia, our Bloomberg Tech Daily newsletter. Virtual anchors in India from the public broadcaster providing weather forecasts, commodity prices, farming trends, and updates on agri-research and state welfare programs to millions of farmers. Think about something like the Bloomberg. You could attach a voice to a certain subset of data.
Right.
So that everybody could customize their data dump that they listen to in an audio form. Right. And you just think about how you could slice and dice, but automatically just pull the data in like, here it is.
Mm-hmm. You know the thing about those AI-generated news anchors, they don't complain.
They don't?
They don't complain.
They're not a member of a union.
They don't need makeup. They don't need wardrobe.
Yep. They don't take days off.
They don't take days off.
They're never late.